opinion about everything. They might not be here tonight. They may be watching on the internet, so we're talking about you. And I don't know who it is. Pastor Black has been totally confidential, that hasn't told me about stuff in the church, so I got nobody in mind. It could be a male or a female. Oh, it got quiet on that one. It could be a family name. What do you mean? Our whole family comes to this church. I've been coming for 30 years, and, you know, we are plank owners in the church. This is my pew. Nobody sits in it. It could be good, it could be bad. But every church has middle management influencers, whether by title, please look up here, or by what's going through your mind right now. If I'm the leader of our home, my wife is a middle management influencer. And then as our children started growing up, the oldest children became influencers. They set the pace for the youngers. Are we still all right? So in every organization, there's middle management. Every church. Hey, if there was 4 of us here, the pastor, his wife, and 2 children, the wife would be the middle management influence of the church. So every church has middle management influence. So he says, I want the 70 to come up. Aaron, high priest, Nadab and Abihu. And notice what happens. Verse 10. Look at verse 10. And they saw the God of Israel. And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire stone. As it were, the body of heaven in its clearness. It's talked about in the book of Revelation. And the Lord said this in verse 12. Come up unto me in the mount, he says to Moses. But I want to stop for a moment to say this. They, in whatever form in verse 10, saw God. However you want to interpret that, they were in the presence in some shape or form of the glory of God, and they knew that was the living God. Would you agree with that? And then after that, verse 12, he says, if you would, to Moses, now I want you to come on up into the mount. I'm going to give you these tables. Verse 13, so Moses rose up. And his minister, who? Say it. So the current pastor goes up, and the future pastor goes up. Would you make that an amen? So Moses goes up, and Joshua goes up. We know Joshua's going to stop and not go all the way up, but notice what happens in verse 14. He said unto the elders, the middle management influencers, tarry ye here for us, until we come unto you. And behold, Aaron and her, middle management influencers, are with you. If any man have any matter to do, let him come after them. So up goes Moses, Joshua's his minister. Aaron and her are left behind. And now I want you to turn to Exodus chapter 32. You're doing great. Exodus chapter number 32. Stay right with me. Exodus 32. Brother Fisher, we don't have any idea where you're going yet. Stay with me. Exodus chapter 32. So up goes Moses into the mount. Up goes Aaron. Aaron stays behind with her to be leaders. The 70 elders are there. Moses, chapter 32, verse 1. And the people saw that Moses delayed to come down. As he delayed, notice what happens. Aaron said unto him, up, make us little g gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. He's going up there. He's going up to get. They don't know the time he's going to be away. It says Moses delayed to come down. It wasn't Moses' decision when to come down. It was God's decision for Moses. Moses is obedient, and they get impatient, and then they said, hey, let's make gods. You know what they're going to do? They're going to mimic what they saw in Egypt. And they're going to fashion a golden calf, verse number 4. And he received them at their hand, fashioned it with the graving tool, what? All the earrings. After he made it a molten calf, and they said, these be thy little g gods, O Israel. Please, verse 5, and when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. Aaron's the high priest. Aaron's the middle manager. Aaron made proclamation and said, tomorrow's the feast to the Lord. And you know what they did? They start dancing around this calf. offering burnt offerings, saying this is the little g God that brought them up. Please look up here. Would you agree that the middle management influence is leading them the wrong way? So let me ask you a question. Where are the 70? Where are the 70 that had just experienced seeing God? You say, well, what do you mean, where are they? Where are they? Why aren't they saying anything? Aaron and Hur saying, let's build this and we'll dance around it and everything. Where are the 70? Aaron saw the glory of God. Nadab and Abihu, where are they? Somebody has just become spectators. And they're watching what's going on, but they're not doing anything about it. And they're allowing the congregation to be led astray in the absence of Moses. Would you agree with that? Everything rises and falls on leadership and on fellowship. And when the fellowship did wrong, the leaders of the congregation did nothing. Even after God said, come up, eat with me, see my glory. Don't get stuck on that. Somebody says, well, if you see God, you're going to die. Somehow they knew it was God's presence, and they knew they had just seen him, and they knew those golden calf wasn't really God. But they had Egypt stuck in their heart. What do you mean Egypt was stuck in their heart? Please look up here and don't miss. Please. Here's the way they were walking in the wilderness. Here's Egypt. Here's the promised land. Please. Here's Egypt. Here's the promised land. And the way the children of Israel were walking the wilderness was this way. They were looking back at Egypt, longing to go back to Egypt, not knowing what was in front of them, but they were walking thinking about Egypt, thinking about Egypt, thinking about Egypt. And they were never going to reach their potential because they were looking back into yesterday and frozen. Our past can control our future. I think we ought to look from the past, learn from the past, experience from the past, have memories from the past, but not be stuck in the past. Because deep hurt and unforgiveness can control tomorrow. How is it controlled? By being stuck in yesterday. Look, I understand abuse. I won't go into detail, but I had it growing up. But you can't get stuck in yesterday. Because if we do, we get anxiety for tomorrow. And we're afraid to go forward. And a church can get stuck in yesterday, how it used to be, what happened back then, whatever it was. Christians can get stuck in yesterday, how it was, what happened, how they got hurt, and become spectators with anxiety for tomorrow. Are you still with me? Did I lose you on that? What do you mean anxiety? Anxiety like I'm afraid of going forward. Why? Because what happened to me in the past and it wasn't fair. And even though it wasn't fair, don't let yesterday produce anxiety for the future. Somewhere we got to be conquerors. Somewhere we have to be overcomers. And all we need is 3 or 4 people to get stuck in the past of why it can't be done in the future with anxiety, and he's limited. And so is this church. We still all right? Now you're looking at me maybe like, well, you don't know what it's like. Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I'll just say it this way. I was in church, our church, 1980, met my wife, we married, started the military ministry, everything's going along well. In 1983, our pastor went to jail for the worst you can think of that I won't mention. You think of the worst that even prisoners don't forget. Okay, that's what he went for. So we had mistrust, distrust, lawsuits, trial, Newspaper, radio, television, please look, but we can't get stuck in that. Care for it? Yes. Minister to it? Yes. But we can't get frozen in that. I didn't even know what was going on. But I can't say, well, look what happened to us, you know. It's true. It's true. But that could give us anxiety to move forward. Fear. The Israelites were walking this way when they should have turned around and went that way. Statement. Moses was not walking backwards. Moses was looking to the future. Joshua was not walking backwards. Caleb was not walking backwards. One of the 10 spies, one of the 12 spies, Joshua and Caleb, they were not walking backwards and saying, you know, we can't do it. 10 of them come back and said, we're not able. 2 of them said, we're well able. That's the difference between how a church goes forward in middle management. 10 spies came back and said, we're not able. And they influenced the entire congregation. So let me get personal. A bad attitude in here can affect what you do as a church. I'm not saying you shouldn't question. You're allowed to question. And knowing Pastor Black the way I do, I know he's probably said to you, if you got something, bring it to me privately. I'm available. How many times has he said it? Because he wants that. What he doesn't want is middle management influencers to go around and begin to influence something by perception. Because if someone's looking this way at the past, they don't have good perception for the future. And it can spread and cause distrust. It can happen in families. It can happen in marriages. I want to look back and learn and grow and have good memories and get something from that and learn from it. But I don't want to stare at the past. It needs to be a rearview mirror glance and looking out the windshield for the future. Would you agree with that? Look at the potential you have here. Look at the potential for your children, your grandchildren. My wife and I have 13 grandchildren. All but 3 of them are in our church. You know, we're getting to the place in 3 or 4 years we could be great-grandparents. I've already had a time where we had 4 generations in our church. My wife's mother got saved when she was 51. She was a former Roman Catholic. Came to our church. Got involved. She wasn't a spectator. She got involved. We have what we call in the nursery rocking grandmas. Not like rock like this. Like they go in, we got rocking chairs for them, and children that are having a bad day, they rock. My mother-in-law was a rocking grandma, faithful for about 10, 15 years, and loved it. That was her ministry. So we had 4 generations in there. I'm looking forward to God allowing us to get 4 generations back again. Not like look at us, but posterity. Legacy. Go on, you still? But why should our grandchildren at 17, 18, 19 hang around if we're doing this? Frozen in the past. Unforgiven, bitter, victims. They don't want to be around that. They want to jump into live streaming. They want to do something. They don't want their lives to be wasted. So we have to be careful about our anxiety and fear for the future. The elders that were called up saw the glory of God, but now they're around a golden calf and they're being quiet. And silence is deafening at times. What do you mean? Silence when something should have been said. Somebody, Nadab, Abihu, should have stand up and said, this golden calf is wrong. I was just in the presence of God. That's not God. But nobody said anything. And Aaron was leading them. Come on. Aaron did some things well, but he was the high priest and he was doing things wrong. Well, I got these earrings, he's going to say later to Moses, and I threw them in the fire and out popped the golden calf. Come on, is that right? What a blame-shifting deal. Okay, are we still okay with my personality? Get past my personality and my preaching style and look at the book. I don't want you to limit the Holy One of Israel. Notice with me a little bit further. Stay with me. Look at Numbers 11. You're doing well. Numbers 11. Just to let you know, we're over halfway through the message, I think. Numbers 11. Watch the pattern again. You're doing well. Numbers 11. We haven't got down to the meat of the matter yet, but we're getting there. Numbers 11. Moses is having a shaky day. What do you mean? He's under the burden. He's oppressed. Look what he says in Numbers 11, verse 14. Verse 14. He says this, I'm not able to bear all this people alone because it is too heavy for me. Oppressed, responsibility, and he gives God a solution. Verse 15, here's a man's solution. If thou deal thus with me, kill me. He just wants to run. He just wants out. If thou deal with us with, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand. If I found favor in thy sight, let me not see my wretchedness. Look, just kill me. He just wants out. Verse 16, and the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me, say it, 70 men of the elders of Israel, 70, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people and officers over them, middle management, influencers. Bring them into the tabernacle of the congregation that they may stand with me. Verse 17, I'll come down and talk with thee there. Watch, and I will take of the Spirit, hey Moses, of the Spirit that's on you, your attitude. I know it because I made it. I put it in you. I'm going to take your spirit and I'm going to put it upon them. So I'm going to have them supernaturally be empowered what I've put upon you supernaturally. So you guys will be of the same mind, and those 70 elders, they're going to help you bear the burden. So you're going to be in agreement because I'm supernaturally going to do that. Look at verse 25. And the Lord came down in a cloud, took of the Spirit that was upon him, Moses, and gave it to the 70 elders. And it came to pass when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, supernatural. 2 of them were in the camp, and they were prophesying. So here's what happens. Please listen. God supernaturally transfers the Spirit that's in Moses, on Moses, and gives it to them to help bear the burden. It's a supernatural transformation. Look at Numbers a little farther. Look at Numbers, please. Numbers chapter, let's go to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers 13. Everybody still all right with this? Numbers chapter 13, you're doing well. Numbers chapter 13. So this is where the spies are sent out. 12 leaders. 12 leaders of 12 tribes. We know 10 spies are going to come back. Watch it carefully. You're doing great. Numbers chapter 13. When they come back, what they're supposed to do is tell them what's in the land. Verse number 18. See the land. You spies go out. You see the land. And come back and tell what it is. Whether there's, strong or weak. Verse 19, see what the land is that they dwell in. There's good or bad, the cities. So they're just supposed to go out and see the what of the land. Like, are the people there? Do they have cities? Are there strong cities? Verse 20, what the land is. Come back and tell us, if you would, if there's grapes and milk and honey and the woods and the fruit. And tell us what. Just come back and tell us what. Tell us about the people. Tell us about, if you would, the cities. Tell us, and I was in reconnaissance. I understand, in reconnaissance, special forces, sometimes they just want you to come back and report. Please look up here, and they don't want your opinion. You're just supposed to come back and say what you saw. Troop movements, equipment. So we're out there, we're laying in the bushes in the jungle, and we're watching troop movements. We're watching the kind of equipment. We're watching the strength of the enemy, and we're reporting that back because it's strategically really important for the next battle. But please listen, I've been debriefed before, and they don't ask you, what do you think? That wasn't the mission. Give us the information and we'll decide what to think. But 10 of the spies came back and say, we saw all this, and here's what we think. We're not able. And they became influencers and discouraged the hearts of the whole people. Joshua and Caleb said, we saw the same thing, and we think we're well able. The 10 spies came back and said, there are giants in the land, and in their eyes, we're grasshoppers. And the statement is, how did they know that? They were spies. What do you mean? They came back. You know the story, right? And they came back and said, in their eyes, we're grasshoppers. They didn't even see them. That's like me thinking about what you're thinking that you're not thinking that I think you're thinking. That's anxiety. That's insecurity. Why? 10 of the spies were doing this. Looking back. 2 of the spies were glancing back, but they were looking forward. And you've got to be a forward-looking congregation. And you've got to be a forward-looking family and have a forward-looking marriage. And you want your children looking forward. I'm not saying history is important. Legacy is important. Grandmothers and pictures and grandfathers are important. Please look up here. All that's important, but bitterness is not something to dwell on. Being victimized is not something to dwell on. You say, but it really hurt me. Okay, listen. I'm okay with that. Just don't get stuck. It hurt. But may God help us to overcome that hurt. It's going to revisit it at times. Something's going to trigger it. Something's going to trigger it. I've been in 3 depressions. At 46, I was in a 9-month-long depression and was suicidal. Still pastoring. You say, man, what kind of church was that? I know. But God grew the church. Another one. 5 months long. This one was fear. I'm talking about fetal position, rolled up, crying. You know I'm talking about, the real thing. I'm not making light of it. You know, no hope. Can't make decisions. Non-confident. Condemning self. I'm not a blamer of others. I'm a blamer of self. I don't blame others much. I just condemn myself. And that voice in there, louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. Just wanting out. That time I didn't want to kill myself, but I wanted to flee. What do you mean flee? So my wife could have a better husband, my children have a better father. That's what depression does. Are we still okay with what I'm saying? Do you understand? Some of you can relate. You can't make decisions. You second guess your decisions. You think you're terrible. The voice keeps telling you you're terrible. A lot of self-talk, principalities and powers. What's self-talk? Just talking to ourselves, remembering how bad things are. I blew this, I messed this up, I really messed this up. They would be better off without me. I'll just go to the woods somewhere. The church needs a pastor. And I'm not it. They need a better pastor so it could really go forward. So I've had 3 of those. My last one was 3 years ago. I won't go into detail what triggered it, but so I understand it's current. But if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, we live this way. And we're anxious and anxiety and fearful of the future. The 10 spies were that way. Joshua and Caleb said, we are well able. And they had seen everything the 10 spies had seen. Please listen. And 10 spies began to limit the Holy One of Israel and influence and discourage the hearts of the congregation. Chapter 14, they said, let's make a captain and go back to Egypt. You familiar with that? Talk to me. Even if you're not, just say yes. Chapter 14, in chapter number 14, they said, let us make a captain and return. God brought us out here to kill us and kill our children. Okay, they just crossed a line. That's what they said in chapter 14. God brought us out here to kill us and kill our children. God was taking them to the promised land. But that's when God said, okay, enough. Everybody 20 and older, you're going to die out here. I'm just going to let you die out. I'm just going to let that attitude die out. Because that attitude is not going into the promised land. You see, I do not, and I don't want you, and I don't want my family. I don't want to see this church limit the Holy One of Israel. I'm going to say this. I don't know, but I think I've known Pastor Black long enough, he wants to see it go forward. Now, he may have a couple days of oppression or here or there, but it'll be temporary compared to what he normally wants. So who can limit the Holy One of Israel? The leadership? Okay, he can, but I don't think he's going to. I'm not going to say he's perfect, but I just don't think he's going to. Well, then who would limit? It would be the fellowship. And I'm not saying you, because chances are they're not here on a Monday night. Well, they might be there. Out of curiosity, they're checking this California guy out. And they already disagree with me. But you can't disagree with the book. It's in there. In fact, can I get down to the really why they didn't go forward? Notice, if you would, they affected the congregation. They discouraged the congregation. Look at Hebrews 3. Hebrews 3, we're almost there. Hebrews 3. Watch what it says, Hebrews chapter 3. Everybody still good? One more? Come on, one more. We love the book, one more. Good, you're doing well. Hebrews chapter 3. You say, man, I like Cheney better. So do I. So I agree with you. Hebrews chapter 3. Look at verse 17. But with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? To whom swear that they should not enter into his rest. But to them that believe not. Watch verse 9 and 19. So we see them, they could not enter in because of what? Say it again, what? Unbelief. Let us, that doesn't stop yet. Chapter 3, verse 19 doesn't stop 4:1. Let us, therefore, fear, lest the promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. What he's saying is, don't do what they did. Us. We know they couldn't enter in because of unbelief. Why? Please, look up here. They were so focused on Egypt, they couldn't see what was going on. I'll say it again. They were so focused on Egypt, leeks, garlics, what we had, that they couldn't see what was going on currently. And I want to tell you this. You don't only want to see what's going on currently, you want to see it. Huh? You don't want to just see what's been happening. How long have you been here, Pastor? You don't want to just see what's been happening for the last 6 months. You say, he said 10 months. It takes 4 months just to get settled. Let you sniff him. Let him sniff you. True or not? So for 6 months, things have been happening. The question is, do you see it? But is it building your faith and belief? Okay, so here's a key scripture. This one I want you to underline. Deuteronomy 29. Deuteronomy 29. Now we're learning Deuteronomy 29. So here's why. And Moses is going to be the speaker, but it's inspired by God. So God's going to tell us why they didn't go forward. And Moses is going to be the mouthpiece. Moses, the pastor of the church in the wilderness. Deuteronomy 29. Deuteronomy 29, verse 2. Key verse. And Moses called unto all Israel. A statement. Would you remind yourself that Deuteronomy, now we're at the latter end of Moses' time. He's going to be on the earth. He's at the end of his being pastor. I know he's going to be taken up. And I understand, please listen. I understand he's supposed to speak to the rock and he hits the rock. And God judges him. But he's not able to go in the promised land. And it limited him. But please listen. God was moving to a new pastor to get him ready to go in the promised land. And I got to tell you, it doesn't seem like God's too angry with Moses. What do you mean? I know he didn't get to go in, but the next time you see him, he's on the Mount of Transfiguration. Come on. Talking with Elijah and the Lord. And we know he comes and he's part of Revelations. Come on, is that right? So I get it. But his 40 years were kind of done. Ye have seen, Moses says, watch, ye have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt unto Pharaoh. Man, you saw the miracles. You saw the plagues unto all his servants and all his land. The great temptations which thine eye has seen, the signs and those great miracles. Verse 4, yet the Lord hath not given you an heart to perceive, eyes to see, and ears to hear unto this day. You know what he just said? You saw it, but you didn't see it. You saw it, but your faith didn't grow. You saw the miracles, but your faith didn't grow. You saw the Egyptians die in the Red Sea, but your faith didn't grow. You saw the manna come down, but your faith didn't grow. You saw water come out of the rock, but your faith didn't grow. You saw Amalekites die, but your faith didn't grow. Something was in the way of your faith growing. They were stuck in the past. And their faith didn't grow. Here's what he said. You saw it, but you didn't see it. Joshua and Caleb saw everything they saw, and they came back and said, we're well able. Why? Because not only did they see it, they saw it. And their faith grew. Why didn't the church enter in? Because of unbelief. Whose unbelief? The middle management. That influenced the congregation. Please listen. You have to see it. And then you have to understand it and perceive it. And your faith grows. You have to look back over 6 months and see what God's been doing. And not let something in the past hinder you from seeing it, from understanding it. Failures can just mount up. Somebody hurt you. And that can be in the way of you seeing. My depression gets in my way. So during depression, they don't trust me. What do you do during depression? I turn it over to the staff to run the church. Really? Yeah. Why? Because I don't trust myself. You say, how does that work? Well, I preach and they run the church when I'm in depression. I don't get it. I have the Thursday morning meeting, but they have a Tuesday morning meeting and make all the decisions, and I come in on Thursday and say, what are we doing? What kind of church is that? It's a church moving forward around me when I'm a little bit down. But I'm not going to stop the entire church because I'm going through a season. You say, well, what kind of season in that? For me, it's a training session. Huh? Yeah, depression brings about pride reduction. Takes away my judgment of people. I'm not saying depression is good. Whatever's faith, whatsoever's not of faith is sin. But I'm telling you what it does for me. It's like going into the fiery furnace or on the potter's wheel where you get marred and softened. It's like going into the refiner's fire. Everybody still okay? And I got to tell you, it's hard for me to hide it. I can fake it for a while. But I can't with the staff. I got to tell them. So I'll get up and preach and cry and bawl and snot and go back and quit on Sunday afternoon. And go back Sunday night and preach again. And people are kind enough to say, thank you, Pastor, that was good. But they tell me some of my better messages when I'm down. But I'm staring at a blank page on the book because nothing's coming out. Can anybody relate to what I'm saying? I'm just not getting anything. So what are you doing then? I'm doing it out of duty until the desire comes back. And sometimes you just got to be a Christian out of duty until the desire comes back and you get excited again. Because when hope leaves, Faith, we know what faith is. We know what charity is. There's a whole chapter on it. But sometimes we don't want to know what hope is until it's not there. Hope allows you to wake up in the morning and wish it was night. And in the night, you wish it was the morning. I won't go into detail on that. But hope can make you so you can't make decisions. You say, where was your wife all that time? She was hanging in there with the children. Did she know you were suicidal? Yes. I'm very transparent with Patty. Well, where was she during that? She's got more tears on her shoulder that came from this man. And she's trying to help me. And for that 9 month there was 2 staff members. And they were allowed to say anything to my wife, and my wife was allowed to say anything to them about me, because we were going to make it through. By God's grace. And I wasn't blaming anybody but myself. You say, were you bitter at me? Because me can get bitter at me. Please listen. And then me can self-talk me and talk us into all kinds of stuff. You say, give me a scripture on that. David, 1 Samuel 27:1 said, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. Who told David that? He said it in his own heart. He convinced himself that Saul was going to kill him, so he went down to the king of the Philistines, Achish. So I got a little prayer. Lord, please protect me from me. Help me not to listen to me. Because there's an old carnal me that wants to mess me up. You say, is it principalities and powers? It's hard for me to discern that. But it can mess up. And I don't want to be stopping the congregation. Please listen, like Miriam, who got leprosy. And for 7 days, the congregation couldn't move until she was punished. What was she doing? She came and went against Moses about who he married. When the bush burned, God already knew who he was married to. Come on, are you still with me? When the bush burned, God already knew he was married to the Ethiopian woman. God still burned the bush and spoke to him. So Miriam and Aaron come up and said, you married an Ethiopian woman. It wasn't that. It was, who put you in control? And God couldn't do anything to Aaron because he was the high priest, so he did it to Miriam. Did I lose you? And the whole congregation stopped for 7 days. I don't want to stop our congregation. I just want to step out of the way and let it keep going. And then when I'm back up again, I'll step where I'm supposed to be. Does that make any sense? That means there has to be good fellowship. And nobody can rise up. That means there has to be good middle management. For a time, a season, when he has to be in heaviness for a while, if need be. And every pastor, look, I've been there 35 years, 40 years at the church. Heaviness is going to come because it's needed to grow. I didn't say I like it, but if God implants the thorn package, we can't say, okay, it's either, okay, Pastor Fisher, leave, or move yourself off a little bit and let us run the place. You just come in and preach. We'll take care of the problems. We'll take care of the vision. We'll take care of reaching people. We'll take care of ministering to families because you're all messed up right now under the covers. Just come out and preach. Then you can go back under your covers. I'm saying that but that's kind of how it happens. And during that time, the church is growing. And woe and behold, it's not because of me. The church does not rise and fall on me. The Lord builds his church. It's not on a man. Moses was a good leader. Joshua was a good leader. But one church limited the Holy One of Israel. Why? Because the middle managers saw it, but they didn't see it. Are you sure about that? Last scripture. Can you hang on one more? Come on, one more. One more. We'll give you a t-shirt when it's done saying, I turned to all the scriptures. Psalm 78. Let's go back. You're doing great. See, you just got lifted up because I said one more. I didn't tell you it's going to last for a half an hour. One more. Psalm 78. You're doing great. I told you I'm not that great a preacher, but we got a great book. Psalm 78. Now, we read Psalm 78, but we didn't read one scripture purposely. Psalm 78. Ready? 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 Getting hungry? Wanting to fellowship? All right. Psalm 78:40. How oft did they provoke him in the wilderness? Grieve him in the desert. Yea, they what? Turn back. Please look up here. Here's turning back. The cloud was moving that way. What's the cloud? God's leadership. The angel of the Lord in the cloud was moving that way. But they were walking this way. Wanting to go back, wanting to go back, wanting to go back. Joshua was it. Caleb was it. Caleb fully, wholly, not H-O-L-Y, W-H-O-L-L-Y, wholly follow the Lord. And 45 years later, he's got his mountain Hebron for his family. Because he never wanted to turn back. So, yea, they turned back and tempted God, and underline it now, limited the Holy One of Israel. How? Verse 42. They remembered not his hand. They saw it, but they didn't see it. Nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. How he wrought his signs in Egypt. You see, they saw all that, they experienced all that, but it didn't turn into faith. Why? Because self was in the way. I'm going to say it again. Self was in the way. What do you mean self? Leeks and garlics. Self. Onions. Self. Let's go back to Egypt. Don't you remember they were killing your males? No, we just remember the leeks and the garlics. We just want to be back there for self-security. Self. Self. You know what hinders a church? A bunch of selves. And we don't want to limit. We want to reach potential because it affects their potential. The young ones. My children have seen us grow. And I'm not saying I grew us. I'm saying the Lord grew us. Please listen. My children, my youngest daughter has been in our church, I'll just say 40 years. She grew up there. She now has 6 children. And she's married to one of our associates. And all they've seen is, yes, some problems along the way. Yes, some problems. But we had to move because we grew. And then we have to move again because we grew. I'm not saying you have to move, but you have to renovate. Is that okay for me to stick my nose in? I know you now. You know me. This is a wonderful place to renovate. Seems like you've already done some. But there's so much potential here. I look on this property and go, ooh. I'm serious. I've already got a number in mind. Oh, that's because you're from California. Right. I'm from the book. I don't claim California. It's just where God called us. My wife happens to like the wind, the water, and the weather. You guys like heat? My wife doesn't either. We drove by the Rio Grande and he said, that's our ocean. Praise the Lord. You love where you're called. Because if God's in it, we love where we're called even though it's a big city. Even though it's California. We love where we're called. Why? Patty was in the military. She was a Navy operating room technician. I was in the military. And one of our major ministries is reaching men and women at 8 military bases from all over the country. and literally the world. I was just meeting with a visitor that came in 2 Sundays ago when we reopened. He was a Navy guy from Kenya. His landlord invited him. I met with him. He said, "This is my church now." Amazing testimony and story how he got there. We care about him so much, and we have a heart for him, and we know the jargon. We know how to talk military. You say, "What's military?" It's a language. If I talk to you about the two shop, you'd go, "What shop?" "The two shop." What's the two shop? See? It's intelligence, security, CIA. We've seen, okay, before I became pastor, please listen, for 3 years, 2.5 years, we had 1,000 military first-time visitors in our church every year. 1,000. I'm not making that up, because that was the ministry God gave my wife and I. Reaching bases with a group of people. And then we'd have 25 to 30 in our home every week, literally. I had a watch bill set up. We had the food would coming in from the church, would pay for it. My wife would cook. Every week, 2 families would come and help us. And they would rotate around, 8 families for a month. And guys would come over after church, eat with us. Gals, eat with us. Some of them I'd take back to the base on a bus, and some of them would stay for Sunday night service, and I'd take them back, and I'd get home at about 1 o'clock in the morning for work the next day. But some of those are missionaries now and pastors. And then we got to the place where we had a bunk room. We turned the garage into a bunk room, and we made it so they could come out Friday night. And they'd come out Friday night, and the rules were, you can come out Friday night, live with us for the weekend, but you must work at the church 3 hours on Saturday with whatever the pastor wants, and I wasn't the pastor at the time. So they worked bus ministry. They worked around the property. They did whatever, and they had 3 hours. And then they could stay with us in the afternoon. We had activities for us, and they had to come to church Sunday morning, and then I'd either take them back for Sunday afternoon. They had laundry to do and things like that, and my wife was not doing their laundry. Or I'd take them back Sunday night, and the church grew and grew. And that's one of the reasons God put Patty and I in San Diego, and it's kept us there. Because we're still reaching. A grandmother praying for a grandson who joined the Navy. In God's will or out of God's will. And she wants us to reach him. We'll send somebody in. Give us the name of the ship, his division, what he does, and we'll try to track him down for you. I'm not saying he'll come. Last week we had 4 visitors walk in. A guy named Aaron brought 3 of them off of his ship. Before the week was out, we realized there were 6 guys off the same ship coming to our church, and now we're hooking them up, and we'll have a meal for them at a home in 2 weeks from now, because next week we got God and Country Sunday. What's God and Country? Patriotic. Our whole church is red, white, and blue right now. We do a special Sunday for the military, everything just before July 4th. If we do it on July 4th weekend, all the guys and gals are not around. So we do it the week before. Does that make sense? It's part of our culture. We have a Spanish ministry that started with 1. What happened? A Spanish guy came to church. No hablo inglés. I didn't know how to speak Spanish. This was many years ago. "Hey, preacher, we got a guy here who speaks Spanish." I said, "Who?" "Oh, okay, great. Let me see him." Brought him over. Hola. That's all I knew. I said, "Hey, brother, come over here. You speak Spanish." I said, "Ask him if he'd like a Bible study, because it's all going to be in English this morning. It's not translated." So he says, "Do you want a Bible study?" He said, "Yes, see, yeah." I said, "Take him over there into this room and have a Bible study. Make it all on Romans and salvation." That morning, that guy got saved. He started coming back. 3 weeks later, he brought 2 people with him. They said, "What do we do now?" I said, "Well, you speak Spanish. Go over the same thing and go over with him again." He said, "I already did it twice. Just go do it again." Now there's 800 that come. I still don't speak Spanish. But God knows, and I'm not making fun of it. You do with what God brings in. Where'd your Spanish pastor come from? a bus route? What do you mean? His wife, somebody knocked on his wife's door. Please listen. He walked on his wife's door. The wife said, yeah, I'd like to come to church. I'd like to bring my children. That's great. He said, yeah, go on. I'm drinking beer and watching football. See you later. She gets on the bus, comes to church with her 2 children. Third Sunday she comes and gets saved. True story. He just said, just don't talk about it here. Just don't talk about it here. Finally, we had a men's baseball game. Softball. And he thought, those bunch of sissies. We invited him to come and play. And we didn't play sissy ball. I was the catcher. I won't go into detail. He came to church after that and got saved. He's our Spanish pastor now. Fantastic. It's the Lord. But you can't do that doing this. Looking back. Because I wouldn't have seen him. What do you mean? I wouldn't have seen him. I would have saw him but not see him. We got to perceive. Somebody walks in. It's unusual. How'd you find out about the church? My antennas go up. What's God doing? I want to see it. And what I don't need is a bunch of negative, gainsaying, Korah, Dathan, and Abiah saying, what are they doing here? And they're sitting in my pew. Well, move over, baby. You sat in somebody's pew when you came in, and somebody was tolerant of you. A church rises and falls on what the Lord is doing. He builds a church, but it rises and falls on leadership and on fellowship. And you've got to have good middle management, lest they limit the Holy One of Israel. And what you don't want to do is stand before God one day as a saved person giving an account of what you did in this body. And God said, you limited what I was planning on doing. But I was hurt, I know. But I gave you the ability to overcome that hurt with charity, with forbearance, with my word, with my spirit. You decided to stay hurt. So you couldn't see. I'm not saying the hurt leaves. I'm not saying the abuse leaves. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying it did happen. But it should not rule our yesterday, which produces anxiety and fear for tomorrow. You say, who's the middle management? Man, I'm glad I'm not on staff here. You missed it. Oh, man, I don't want to be on. Don't make me a leader. I want to tell you something. You may already be one. Have you told anybody your opinion? I hope it was positive. Because you're an influencer. Not me. I'm a nobody. You're a nobody influencer. People are listening. Sooner or later, a pastor's going to stand up, and he's probably already done it once in a while, and said, I think we ought to build this or rebuild this or revamp this or do this. And that's when you're going to see if the gainsayers are here. What's a gainsayer? Somebody just negative about whatever there is to be negative about. I'll say it again, they're just negative about anything to be negative about because they're stuck on themselves. The church in the wilderness was walking backwards. All they could see was themselves. Except Joshua and Caleb, they wholly, fully followed, and their families benefited. Moses was a good pastor. Joshua was a good pastor. God magnified Joshua, he magnified Moses, but one he was very displeased with, not with the pastor, but with the congregation. So he let the congregation die off, please listen, and took their children in. And he took them in because you don't stop the church. It's a matter of whether you're a spectator or a participant. And I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be a participant. And I hope you do too. I like your spirit already. You hung right in there. I mean, stick your little finger out and say, okay, thank you, Pastor Fisher, whether you mean it or not. But go away thinking about, I don't want to limit the Holy One of Israel. We don't want to limit the Holy One of Israel. We don't want to limit the Holy One of Israel. Please, Lord, help me not to limit the Holy One of Israel in my family, in my marriage, in my friendships, in the church. Let's bow our heads. Nobody leaving. Just bow your heads. You're doing great. Pastor, I understand. I think I understand what you were talking about tonight. I think I understand. If you think you do, as you're pondering it, would you raise your hand? I think I understand. Come on. I think I understand. I know it's long. I think I understand. Please, Lord, help me not to limit the Holy One of Israel. Help me to see and perceive. May faith grow in me. I want to be part of the church in the promised land. I want our church to go forward. I want our family to go forward, our marriages. Please, Lord. Please, you've done so much. Don't let me limit you, please. I want to apologize if you felt like I scolded you tonight. I did not mean to do that at all. I believe you're doing great. I just know there's so much more coming by the Lord.
I'm just going to have Ruth play the piano for just a few minutes. If you feel like praying, please continue. If you feel like coming to the altar, that's fine as well. I think the Lord met with us tonight. Let's thank Him for that.